everybody. Thanks for your time. My name is Will, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mafic, a construction intelligence company. We've developed a wearable device which attaches to the back of a hard hat, and from the movement of somebody's head, we can measure cost and schedule performance index. This works because for every activity you perform, your head creates a unique movement signature. At the moment I'm talking, I'm waving my hands a little bit, and that motion of my hands is translated into my head. My head motion is indicative of talking. You're listening. I hope I can't see you actually at the moment, but your heads are probably fairly stationary with the occasional nod. And again, that lack of movement and that occasional nod is indicative of listening. So what we do is we capture that movement, and using machine learning, we classify that as a particular activity. So translating this into a construction site, you can quite quickly see how using a nail gun, circular saw, welding machine, grinder, we can start to categorize people's day into distinct activity chunks. We can then aggregate it away from the personal level to a point where we can measure productivity and progress automatically every 15 minutes and even in a specific location of a project. So my background is not deep technology, but construction. I'm an engineer by trade, and I spent my entire career up to 3 years ago working in shipyards in China, Japan, and Korea. I revel in heavy industries and the challenges of managing large workforces. And my most recent role was working for Samsung Heavy Industries in Korea. Now, in addition to being successful in electronics, Samsung are also the world's third largest commercial shipbuilder. Numbers 1 and 2 are Daewoo and Hyundai. So in Korea at the yard, every day we had about 50,000 people come in through the gate. Setting these people up for a safe, productive day's work was extremely difficult. The tools we had available to us were spreadsheets, experience, and a bit of gut instinct. So this is the point where I had my light bulb moment. I wanted to create some technology which could be used to improve the efficiency and safety of these industrial workplaces. So I brought my family back to the UK to start a new chapter in our lives and hopefully a new chapter in the construction industry. So this evening, I'd like to talk to you about the value of upskilling a low-skill workforce. I want to tell two stories. The first is an incident which happened to me during the construction of one of our major capital projects I was working on in Nigeria. The second story is told using data we've collected at Mafic. I'll argue through both stories that the value of having a skilled workforce is disproportionately high compared to the cost of creating that workforce, even in what the government calls a low-skill industry such as construction. Before we start, I'd like to clarify some terminology. When I refer to low skill, low skill or high skill, I'm not referring to the qualification that somebody holds or the training that they've undertaken to achieve that qualification, more their ability to perform a task safely and efficiently and get it right first time. So my first story, in 2018, I was working for Samsung on an FPSO project for Nigeria. Now, an FPSO is effectively a floating oil refinery anchored offshore in one place for 20 years. It produces oil directly from the well, processes it on the deck, stores it, and then sells it to trading tankers that come up behind to offload. So I was the transportation and installation manager for Samsung. So I was responsible for getting this FPSO from Korea to Nigeria, where we integrated some more modules, and then from Lagos in Nigeria to the offshore site and hooking her up offshore. So this particular FPSO was the world's largest oil refinery sitting on a tanker. As I said, it was built in Korea, installed in Nigeria, and would produce 20% of Nigeria's oil for the next 20 years. This project was a massive engineering project. Project management and construction was just off the scale. It took 7 years to design and build, 60 million man hours, and cost more than $4.5 billion US. So the stakes were set pretty high. So the events I'm going to describe happened on the last leg of the journey from the integration yard in Lagos Harbour to the offshore site. Lagos Harbour is a rather unique harbour. There's multiple creeks, lagoons, which make the tidal flow incredibly complex. These large bodies of water empty very quickly through narrow bottlenecks, creating, as I said, truly unique conditions. We actually found that at some states of the tide, at different depths of the water column, the flow could be in completely opposite directions. Now, because the FPSO is anchored in one place for 20 years, and unlike a tanker, it doesn't have any propulsion. So this means it has to be maneuvered by a number of tugs, which can either attach to it with a tow line or sort of go bow on and sort of push the FPSO around. Now, all of these tugs have to be controlled by a single person who's normally placed on the FPSO. All of these circumstances were known challenges, and so as a project, we spent a huge amount of time and money planning, simulating this maneuver, which in the end would take less than 90 minutes to complete. So for the entire operation, we had 5 harbour tugs. We had 2 spare standing by. We had 3 ocean-going tugs, which were waiting at the mouth of the entrance. We had a further 2 spare standing by a little way offshore. We had 2 security vessels, and we also had the Nigerian Navy standing by at a 6-mile radius. So all in all, we had 16 vessels. There were media vessels and all sorts of other vessels as well, but there were 16 vessels that were physically involved in the sort of the operation. So all was going well. We were just about out of the harbour when the Dyneema section of the tow line on the starboard tug failed. We use Dyneema since traditionally it's incredibly strong and lightweight, meaning the deck crews can handle it easily in circumstances where minutes can often make the difference. Wire rope often needs some sort of a crane or a winch to be handled safely. So we had anticipated this eventuality, perhaps not quite such at a critical moment, and we had a second line rigged up on the bow ready to go. This was passed to the tug, connected. However, not more than a minute or 2 after we'd taken up tension on this new line, then the opposite side, the port tug line, also failed. We were still inside the harbour at this point and headed very quickly for the edge of the channel. On board the FPSO, I had access to our tug management system, which gave me the real-time position of every single vessel in the operation, as well as their vector. It would also predict the position of the FPSO 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes into the future. Looking at the TMS, in 20 minutes, the FPSO was going to be firmly on dry land. So I was on the bow with Phil, the foreman from the offshore hookup team, and we had a critical decision to make. We could either use another Dyneema line, which was lightweight, easy to pass to the tug, and connect, or we could opt for the ocean-going tow line, which was a 76mm sort of wire rope. Very difficult to handle, but very unlikely to break. It would take about 20 minutes before the Osaragu, the tug that we wanted to pass this line to, could connect it and take up tension, compared to probably about 10 minutes using the lightweight rope. We opted for the wire rope, despite the TMS telling us we would be aground in 20 minutes. The next 15 minutes would decide if a $4.5 billion FPSO was going to become a permanent feature of Lagos Harbour or not. The first step to transfer a tow line to a waiting tug is to pass a heaving line from the deck of the FPSO to the aft tug. And this is normally a 12mm soft rope with a monkey's fist in the end. A monkey's fist is a weighted knot which ensures the end of the rope goes the furthest. Now, I'm sure many of you, or some of you, can relate to this, but throwing a rope is one of those things which you think will be 100% trivial, right up until the moment when you let go and you realize you've completely underestimated this seemingly simple task. One of our deck crew, he stepped up, coiled the rope into 2 hands, performed a couple of muscle memory rotations, and sent the line sailing over the aft deck of the waiting tug 30 meters away, straight into the hands of the deck crew on board the Osaragu. And over the next 10 minutes, the deck crews on both the tug and the FPSO worked furiously to release pennants, open and secure shackles, release the line ready for the tug to take up tension. After 15 minutes, tension was taken up on the line and we started to regain control of the FPSO. However, unfortunately, this was not the end, but only just the start of a really long day for everybody. So with 5 tugs connected, we left the harbour and straight into an unexpected current running from east to west across the mouth of the entrance, something we had not considered since we were 60 minutes later than scheduled. Within 20 minutes of leaving the harbour, we had broken every single line on the FPSO, apart from that one wire rope that was attached to the Osaragu. We were also drifting towards Lagos, drifting through the anchorage at Lagos Harbour and towards the beach. Now, the Osaragu is an 80-ton tug, which is it's a large harbour tug, but in the context of things, when it's the only thing connected to this behemoth, it's not particularly big. The master manoeuvred up current of us and paid out as much line as he could to dampen the shock loads, but also provide more directional stability. So the problem with this is if you have a very short line, you get the shock loads, and there's a high risk of breaking the line again. Likewise, if the tow line is not over the back of the tug, there's a risk that you can what's called girt the tug or capsize the tug. Effectively, the tow line pulls the tug over. So we were now purely in the hands of the master of the Osaragu. I shut myself in the tow control room and fixed my attention on the positioning system, texting updates to the Samsung CEO. Slowly, I watched the vector of the FPSO from heading towards the beach, slowing down and reversing and heading out towards open ocean. We were making progress and my tunnel vision was starting to clear. This is when I got a call from the Osaragu master. Their port engine is overheating and they have to reduce power to 50%. My heart sank. Straight back to the text message to the boss in Korea. The chief engineer from the Osaragu worked for the next 30 minutes, jury rigging, additional cooling, flexible pipes, and additional cooling to the engines. 20 minutes later, the master came back on the radio informing us that they were ready to increase power back up to 100%. Now, I know this sounds like something out of Star Trek, but hand on heart, this is exactly how it went down. At this point, I was standing on the heli deck, and I could hear the breaking waves about 200 meters away. A further 20 minutes passed, tablet in hand, and I can see we were slowly edging centimeter by centimeter towards deeper water and safety. So by about 1800 that afternoon or that evening, we were about 50 nautical miles to the south of Lagos under a two-tug wire rope tow, assessing the damage. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, and fortunately, the only damage was superficial and mainly caused by placing all of the tugs on one side of the FPSO and pushing. Their collective horsepower had actually managed to dent the side of the FPSO. So lessons learned sessions were put on hold since we were 24 hours away from rolling into a 21-day installation campaign where we would work day and night to secure the FPSO in her final position. So since then, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about the events surrounding Lagos Harbour, what went wrong, what could we do differently next time. And for me, the overwhelming, apart from the technical side that we can always change and what have you, but the overwhelming message for me was just how dependent we were on the skill level of a few individuals who, before the operation, were not considered key. The rigger who stepped up and made that perfect throw, the deck crew on board the Osaragu who heaved the wire rope across and secured it in the shark's jaws and connected it to their primary tow line in record time. And then the chief engineer in the engine room on board the Osaragu who nursed his engines through the 6-hour ordeal. These three individual groups of people came together and did what they've been trained to do. Their consistent, unwavering ability to perform at the highest level under extreme pressure made the difference between catastrophe and a great learning experience. So the second story I want to tell you, fortunately for me, is not quite as dramatic as my Lagos Harbour experiences, but again demonstrates how reliant major capital projects are on non-key individuals and the value high-performing people can bring to the table. So I'll use a portion of our Mafic dataset, which comes from the dry lining industry in the commercial and residential sectors here in the UK. Before we jump in, I'll give you a bit of a background onto the data, what it looks like and how it's made up. So here we go. Here's the raw data. This is a typical day. This is one person, starts from 7 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. There's 2 breaks there. And we categorize this day in the simplest form, in the simplest classification we have, into four buckets. We've got hat off, stationary, active, and walking. So active is any time spent creating value-adding work. Stationary is non-value adding work. Walking obviously includes walking, and also stair time and hoist time. So when you look closely at this data, what you can see is that the active time is not continuous. It's broken up into at most probably 1 or 2 minute chunks. And we like to think of this as sort of a concentration time. If you sort of think back to last time you're doing some manual work or something, you can't work continuously for a long period of time, because you're either exerting yourself or you have to actually think what comes next. So we like to call this the flow. And what we found is the more experienced people have far better flow than the less experienced people. So in order to sort of build on that, I'll describe some mechanisms at play here. This chart here, on the y-axis, we have average active time in a particular day. So we've got high performers at the top, low performers at the bottom. A day where somebody puts in a 60 to 80% active time is a very good day. Below 20% or below 15% is a sort of a low performing day. On the x-axis here, we've got the average duration that they spend during that. Sorry, the average duration they spend doing that activity, and in this case, it's being active. And each dot is one person, one day. So you can see quite clearly that there's a very strong correlation between the high performers and the average time they spend being active. So when they start being active, they're active for about 20 seconds. Whereas the low performers, when they start being active, they're only average for sort of 8 to 10 seconds. And similarly, when you look at stationary, there's a similar relationship here. So again, high performers, when they're active, their stationary, sorry, when they stop being active, their stationary time is very short and their flow is very, very high. So putting this all together, I'm going to make a bit of a jump here from this data to a CPI. There's a whole load of further machine learning, mashing of data together, and all sorts of stuff which I probably couldn't even describe at the moment. I would have to get some of the cleverer people in the organization to help me with that. But this is the output. This is the CPI measurement, and this can be of a person, of a group of people, of a team, of everybody on the project. It can be for a space. It can be, and also sort of sliced over a time series, so hours, days, weeks, months, years, project duration, all of that kind of stuff. And the astute amongst you will probably be quick to point out there's 2 elements to this. There's the budget. So what do we set as one? And of course that's entirely dependent on the client and where we set the budget. The other side is actually the performance of the workforce, or the performance of that space, and it's this point which I really want to focus on.
Could you just explain what CPI is, please?
Sorry, yeah, cost performance index. So
in terms of, for the data people out there, because the data people might not know about CPI and SPI, could you just explain what the composition of it is? Yeah. And its use in terms of project delivery? Yeah, so you use it's a ratio of your planned cost versus your actual cost. So any work that has a CPI of more than 1, that means you're under budget, and if it's less than 1, you're over budget. So there's 2 elements to the project management. There's the CPI controlling the cost and the SPI controlling the schedule. And the same thing for schedule. If you're under 1 for schedule, then you're behind schedule. If you're over 1, you're ahead of schedule. So we're always trying to get it over 1. And traditionally the way construction companies take this measurement or make this measure at the moment is over an entire project. How much money have I spent on this project over 2 weeks, and how much did I plan to do? So you get a data point every 2 weeks or 4 weeks.
So the real sort of step change in technology that we have here is actually being able to measure it on such a short time basis and at such a granular level. Right. Sorry. So moving on to productivity distribution. So this is a chart of a workforce. There's about 120 or so individuals here. So each column represents one person, and it's the and it represents the average performance or CPI of that person. So each bar is made up of about 300 to 500 hours. And probably the most striking feature you'll see on this is the distribution of people. So you've got the really high performers on the left-hand side who are putting out almost 7 times the output than the low performers on the right-hand side. Now, the next question that follows is perhaps, well, what are these people getting paid? And if you look at the pay rate for these people, you'll find that it's broadly flat. There's no difference. It's very hard to pay these people according to the output that they put out. So the question that follows is, how do we move the people on the right-hand side up the chart towards the people on the left-hand side? There are multiple levers that we can pull, such as better training, hiring, retention, as well as motivation, incentivization, and upskilling. And when I say motivation and incentivization, one of the examples which I'll talk about is sort of a bonus payments that we're working with one of our clients. The really exciting element to all of this is the size of the budget available. So if, as an example, if we moved the bottom third of this distribution of this workforce up to the average of the rest, there would be a 23% saving on labor cost. And in a world where profit margins are down in single figures, this is genuinely industry-changing numbers. One of the, I'll run through a quick example of one of the initiatives we're running with one of our clients. There's a bonus payment for each of the individuals. So each of the individuals who wear the device, they've got access to the Mafic app. And they can access their own personal data through that, so they can see exactly what they were doing historically. And these people are the only people that can see that level of personal data. When we send it to the client, it's always aggregated and anonymized up. So somebody coming in on a Wednesday can look at his data on a Tuesday and say, actually, I had a tough day yesterday and I've earned an extra 15 quid or 20 quid or 40 quid. And what we're doing, we've got a bonus payment of up to £250 a week, which represents about a 31% increase, a pay increase for the top performers. So it gives people control and actually sort of a tangible handle on their sort of their earnings, and actually incentivize them to go that extra mile. So of course, paying people more, that's always going to impact the project economics. So we want to demonstrate, we need to be sure that that's the return on investment is sound. So my next slide here. So this is okay. I'm back to the cost performance index on the x-axis and profit margin on the y. So of course, as we get over 1 for the cost performance index, our profit margin will start to increase. And this is data from one of our clients. It's obfuscated, but the structure and the principles still hold true. So with the bonus scheme of this £250, what happens is obviously we reduce our profit margins, or we reduce the customer's profit margins. But at low end of the performance index, when the CPI is less than 1, the amount we pay out is obviously very small. And as the performance of the project improves, those bonus payments get more and more. So which is obviously okay, because the profit is being more successful, the project is being more successful and making more money. And again, the really exciting thing for me is to be able to, that green line there, you have to spend a significant amount of money to make that green line go horizontal or even negative.
And the fundamental reason behind this is twofold. It's that distribution of performance within the workforce, that 7 times difference between the high performers and the low performers, and their the flat pay scale that they have across that. Those are the 2 elements which mean the economics of the project. We can pay so much more and still be really successful and really profitable. So I'm sure many of you guys have sat in town hall meetings or company team building events and heard someone tell you, perhaps you might even said this yourself, that you guys are the most important asset this company have. I've heard this, and unfortunately, that's often where the conversation stops. As I've hopefully just demonstrated, we now have the technology in construction to start recognizing people properly. After Lagos, I sent a letter to the tug owners. Sorry, I beg your pardon. It was to the master of the Osaragu, explaining the role they played in the entire operation, the difference they made. I understand that letter is now framed and it's on the bridge of the Osaragu, and everybody on board that vessel understands who it came from and why it's there. I hope I've demonstrated through my own experiences as well as through the data that investing in people the right way and having the right tools to measure performance will genuinely yield far better financial returns than Apple, Bitcoin, or Berkshire Hathaway. Not only do we have the right tools to really understand how to help people perform, but I believe this is a significant step forward to making material difference to employee engagement and job satisfaction. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation, and I believe now is the time for any questions if you have any.
So thank you, Will. Great presentation, really enjoyed that. Excellent stuff. Gareth, if you want to, is the man. So what we're going to do now is a bit of a panel session. So it's me and Gareth asking Will some questions and just kicking some stuff about. We'll do that for a period of time until we run out of mojo, and then we will open the floor to everybody. So in due course, you can all come off mute and then join in. So great presentation, Will. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks,
so thank you. So Gareth, would you like to open up?
Yeah, absolutely. So this for me is so exciting. I really sort of love this, the whole concept behind this, and there are so many different avenues that this can go in. The kind of the cultural implications on the workforce, the skills angles, the sort of productivity in the workforce. And hopefully we'll kind of touch on those and lots of other topics. But one of the things that just really kind of struck me to start with was just asking a really simple question about why you picked, given your background is obviously sort of the sort of shipbuilding and heavy industries, why you'd pick construction as the place to start with this kind of tech.
Yeah, great question. I didn't start with construction. So what actually happened? I was living overseas in Korea, and yeah, started with shipyards there. To be honest, it was a clash of family things, moving family back to the UK, kids in school, and trying to sell a startup or sell product at arm's length into companies in Asia when I was based in the UK was too difficult.
Yeah.
Likewise, the sort of the environment for startups in the UK is absolutely fantastic, and we can have these kind of conversations. There's less of these in Asia, and then especially sort of the language and the cultural barriers. It's much a higher barrier. So yes, it's my network is very firmly in the heavy industries, in the oil and gas and shipbuilding and what have you. But I live in UK where that part is fairly sort of it's dwindling.
Yes.
So yes, it was right. Let's go and meet some construction people and learn about commercial and residential constructions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, but it's got so many huge implications for anybody wearing a hard hat and then potentially well beyond. So it's absolutely, whilst it's sort of the early gains coming in construction, and the example that you used from one of your clients is still all very sort of applicable to lots of these other sectors, isn't it?
Exactly, and this is startup, it's in startup world, you have to be
Yeah.
laser focused on a particular product, and this is the problem you're going to solve. And we have these conversations. Oh, we can do this and we can do that, and it's great. But it's we have to sort of rein it all back in and actually go, no, this is the problem we're solving now. And yes, we'll solve that problem sort of next month, next week, next year, or what have you. But yes, it can go in many different directions. And my vision is to be sort of, could be the lifeblood of these construction industries. It touches sort of all disciplines and departments, from conflict resolution to the project controls to pre-construction to even designing your vertical transport strategy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And then presumably, as you say, laser focus then on the sort of the next deliverables and the next sort of set of challenges in front of you. Through you must have kind of had a whole series of barriers that you've had to overcome as a startup. Is that something you can kind of talk through what are the big kind of learnings and challenges that you've kind of had to deal with from that perspective?
The data that comes off the device, we can measure CPI and SPI, progress, productivity, but we can also do health and safety side of things. So we understand where people have micro slips, trips and falls, hand and arm vibration, high noise, dust, all this kind of stuff. So one of the questions was, take a step back. My why is to create something that serves not only the shareholders of these construction companies, but the operatives as well. We can't just be increasing share value, especially in the sort of, for the blue collar workforce. It's such great opportunity here that we have to share this advantage. So health and safety, are we a health and safety product or are we a productivity product, and how do we sell that? And what we found is, like, different layers throughout the contracting structure that have different priorities. Some of these companies are barely hanging on, so it's productivity, it's CPI. Whereas the more successful companies, they have a bit of a luxury. They can actually sit back and say, well, yes, we can sacrifice some profit because we want to. Safety is very important to us. So we've had to sort of split the company, or it depends who we're talking to or who we're selling to, that we prioritize that productivity or safety. But essentially, the safety goes with everything, or at least some form of safety goes with all of our products, because we think that's fundamental, and it's something that people shouldn't be deprived of.
Yeah, absolutely. But then, so, and I couldn't agree more. I guess it's one of these things that, by not everybody sees safety as such a sort of an important and top of the list of things to do, and actually there's presumably a fair amount of skepticism when you're kind of leading to certain people with a safety related product that also does what it does from a productivity side of things. So is that a kind of a people and a cultural challenge that you've also kind of had to overcome, of selling this to people that are going to be wearing the hat?
Yeah, so technology adoption, and there's adoption challenges from the guys who are wearing a hat through to the guys who actually we want to use, for them to use it and actually start making decisions off it. Communication obviously is key to all of that sort of, and then once you're past the communication, for the guys on the workplace, it's, well, in the organizations where there's a lot of trust, then it's generally an easy conversations. Again, in construction, it's fairly cutthroat sometimes. So there's organizations with there's lower levels of trust, and the question comes, what's in it for me? So this is where, so sometimes that's answered with, okay, that you get access. This is how we protect your privacy. You get access to this data. You can create a digital CV. So if you want to go and get a new job, this is how you perform against the national average, the regional average, and you can go and justify your £25 or whatever it is, kind of thing. The next stage after that is, right, okay, let's have some performance-based bonuses and pay people purely based on their performance. So lots of different things, and it depends on the client, the environment that we're talking to, which levers we have to pull for that.
So in terms of that data, Will, so you talk about it being private data. Are you blocking? So if you're working in a construction company, say a concrete company, right, and you get a lot of churn of people, and you're thinking, right, I want to pay people who are sort of earning much more productivity for the concrete company. Are you saying that because it's private data, you won't necessarily share which people are sort of underperforming and then need some interventions? And then if they've got those interventions, what does that mean? What does that look like? Is that the sort of stuff you'd be sharing or not?
Yeah, so the performance-based pay side of things, we have to know who is wearing the device because we need to pay them. So there's a consent process that goes through. But even if people opt into that scheme, their detailed data is still held separate from their name. So we'll send a table to the client and say, this is the bonus that person earned, pay that. The data which people use for project management to make decisions is anonymous, and it's all aggregated up. So there's no way you can actually drill into the data and find out that this person was in that place at that time and then sort of persecute that person for whatever reason, or target that individual. So
I can understand it in terms of the bonus payments is that if people are overachieving, got to identify them because you've got to pay them. But the people who are underachieving, so one of your comments was your bottom third of people, if you lift them up, then you can increase overall productivity significantly. Yeah. That sounds like a really great thing to do. Instead of trying to squeeze more out your top performers, you're trying to lift up your bottom performers, right? So there's both things you can do at the same time.
Exactly. So so what we do is we send a summary to the supervisor of his 20 guys. And he can see that, right, I've got 5 people who are underperforming here, and that supervisor will know exactly who those people are. And it's his job to either put them on, say, a one task, get them doing one activity all the time, and their productivity will go through the roof if they're that way inclined, or give them more training, or change their job. So yes, we don't say this person, he's a 10%er, go and fire him, go and do something. It's like, these are the people, you've got 3-4 people here that need attention, you need to raise those up, and these are the levers we'll give for you to pull.
Yeah.
But, so then, yeah, sorry, go on, Martin, you carry on.
Some advice for people out there. So I would say to get into this, and it's not just in terms of things like helmet sensors, right? So hard hat sensors. You can look at people's productivity in terms of, if you're in project controls, right, what's your sort of estimating effectiveness? What's your ability to get schedules written in a certain time, etc.? So I can compare a person against their peer group. So we can start to do this across loads of different functions, right? If we do it, there's a question then about what is the ethical use of that data? So what do you do with that data? And I think there's a challenge to all of you then is, right, if you start to use this data for inappropriate purposes, you can start to get into blacklisting. So if you start to use it to say, right, we're not going to work with these sort of people, then you start to prohibit them from working in the labour force, and then you get yourself into legal sort of challenges. So I would say you've got to think some of these capabilities through. And I think some of the safeguards that Will's put on this is probably protecting against it, but I'd imagine there's some strong clients out there who probably want to get inside the data more and more and more. And if you do that too much, you start to expose yourself to blacklisting. So just
yeah, so I completely agree with that, but I think it's all about then how you use that data, because following on using this example, what you could do is recognize that actually you've got a challenge with a proportion of the workforce, so that's something that we should train everybody in. So let's not even get down to the level of picking the 5 or 10 that we think are lowest performing. We recognize there is a task that is not being sort of performed as well as it could be, so let's give everyone refreshers on that and see what that does. So there are various different ways around to but yeah, absolutely. You need to think about it, and you need to make sure that you're not stepping into these areas, because it is so new, and it's nobody's done it before. Nobody's had the data to be able to do it before. So and I guess part of that then is the sort of gamification side of things, and giving people their own data to see this kind of thing, and how it gets used, but and which then sort of things like Strava and other sort of apps that exist like that around your giving yourself your own best score, and can you beat your record, and yeah, improve your kind of overall productivity, and what do you do, what hints and tips as to how you might do that. There's loads of stuff like that, and presumably there's also, I mean, we talked about some high level activities and splitting that, but is it, can you go further in terms of tasks and different activities, and tell the difference between, yeah, not just walking but running and walking, and yeah, and then particular active activities?
Yeah, Gareth, I just want to last point on the ethical side of things, because it's a great question, very, very relevant, and probably in the future one of our biggest challenges. At the moment, we don't have those answers. We know there is a huge risk. This technology could be used in completely the wrong way, and it could sort of make a huge amount of detriment to the way people work. I see in the future, we had a few questions came up recently, and we formed our own sort of ethics committee. I mean, we're only a small company, but I tried not to make it the top leadership team. But we sort of talked it through, and we have this ethics committee. I see in the future that this may even be an independent, outsourced type thing, that where when we were sort of looking at huge data sets and sort of construction populations across London or the UK or something like this, these kind of decisions would be made outside. But it's fundamental to ensure that people don't get the sort of that end of the stick, and everybody is protected. In the right hands, it's hugely powerful. In the wrong hands, yeah, it can be problematic. So fundamental to growing the business and making sure everybody benefits is that strong ethics.
So in terms,
sorry.
Go on. Sorry, Will.
No, I was going to go on to the second part of the detailed activities.
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So our most simplest activity classification is active walking, stationary, or hat off. But yes, we can start to count the number of screws that go into a apartment, the number of nail guns, the number of the meters of head track, the meters of weld. It's again sort of back to ethics. We can detect when people are smoking, but we don't want to detect when people are smoking, because that's not our problem, kind of thing. It's I mean, like Facebook and like all of Google, they know so much about us, but stuff which they can't commercialize, so they don't bother publishing it or anything like that. And similar to us, the machine learning is so powerful, but there's an area that we don't need to touch and we don't want to touch. It's not relevant to sort of improving people's lives.
So, Will, what does this look like in 5 years' time? You know, what's your vision? Where are you going to take this?
So I want this to be used to design construction sites, like shipyards, for example, or construction sites, to actually build construction sites from the bottom up, from the people, get the welfare in the right place, get the vertical transport, and actually sort of stop with this top-down look, and actually see, well, how do people perform? How do we shape an environment where people can perform at their best and have the best opportunity to earn a living and be safe? So that means it sort of reaches into that pre-construction stage, into the execution side of things, and also into the sort of the final settlements, even conflict resolution, and likewise into the benchmarking, into the government productivity, what is so the Deloitte crane survey, I'm sure you're familiar with that, when Deloitte goes around and counts cranes to as a proxy for a barometer on the economy, looking at people's overtime over the course of the week. This near time data that the government scrapes off restaurant bookings to try and assess COVID. They do that in real time, sort of, and get the data within a week. It's a similar sort of thing, to use this real time data so we can make financial decisions, or can make sort of policy decisions on such a short term, on a short term. It touches every side, from earning more money to getting better trained for the individuals, to planning projects and having safer environments and less chronic diseases.
That's really cool. So two questions. Is first one in terms of churn, right? So if you've got a workforce that's always changing, can you pick up sort of what their mobilization time is before they start to become really productive? So can you track that? And the second question is, if you did some A/B testing, so you changed the methodology about, plasterboard or something like that, so you can then start to pilot it and start to roll it out across the entire industry very, very rapidly with some real-time data about the productivity impact. So you then start to transform productivity from grassroots level, evidenced, and you can scale it up with your metrics and understand the exact implication of it. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
So I know you're like, if I ask you what's the least productive day of the week, you'll probably tell me
Friday, Monday.
There we go. But you can't tell me what's the drop in productivity. And from our data, yeah, Monday's the least productive day of the week, and there's an 11% drop compared to sort of the average of the rest. And this is this sort of evidence-based project management. We all know this kind of stuff, but we don't actually know the magnitude of that. And so if we don't know the magnitude, we can't make decisions.
Yeah, exactly. You can't build a policy that says, you know what, everyone starts at 10 on a Monday, and works that extra hour at their leisure some other day during the week on a hunch. But if you've got actually, you know what, 10% less productivity on that Monday, then yeah, absolutely, you can build a policy around that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've sorry, Martin, the second part of it's that all that kind of stuff, that evidence-based, there's some sort of gold nuggets that come out of this. Is like, wow, I never would have expected that. That's absolutely brand new. And there's other stuff was like, well, yeah, I knew that, but I didn't know how big it was. So that's still really valuable.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. Should we pick some of the questions up, Will?
Yes.
And if the people who's raised the questions, if you want to come off mute, if you want to ask the question yourself or whatever, then please feel free to do so. So Shirley Thomas has said their lovely presentation. Thank you. Vabe, do you measure the performance, particularly for each worker, and what data is collected?
And sorry, Will, in fact, so there's a second question that's how will productivity be measured for bonus scheme? And do you know anything about, or does that start to demotivate low-skilled workers?
Yeah, so there's a whole load of artifacts that we are yet to determine from this. Measuring productivity, it does depend. Interestingly, what we found is that we look at some budget, and a CPI of 1 for a plasterer is actually, you don't have to work so hard to get the CPI of 1 for a plasterer as you do for a fixer, for example. And that artifact, we're sort of trying to understand where that comes from, but that may be sort of inefficiencies in the way that the work is presented to that plasterer historically. So yes, what we have to do is actually understand sort of the circumstances around that person working, and it may, if somebody has a low score, it may not necessarily be his fault, because the supervisor hasn't got work for him, or he hasn't got the tools, or there's another trade in front of him. So it's not always we have to be very careful how we apply this, and it's not a black box magic bullet. There's always a human in the loop, that has to have eyes on that and make some assumption. I mean, one thing we're not an automated payment system, machine learning black box. We're just giving extra data points to make better decisions.
That's cool. That's very cool.
So I was reading some of the other questions as well, but do you want to? Was that answered, or the first part?
So yeah, I think that answers a bit of the question from SM. I don't know, Dinmo, you've put your camera on. Did you have a question that you wanted to ask? You're muted.
Okay, I was just wondering, well, it's quite interesting to hear what you had to say, but yeah, lots of ethics will be there. And I was wondering how you would manage conflicts. How would you resolve conflict during when developing an evidence towards policy? What have you given that a thought?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the first position we take is actually to question the data all the time, and actually get boots on the ground, get eyes on whatever that problem is, and solve it with a sort of a more traditional approach. The purpose of this is to benefit people, and so using it as a whip to crack people is not the most efficient use of this at all. So certainly we want to avoid conflicts where we can, and make a sort of a fair rules-based policy with as many stakeholders as possible.
So you're linking this to quality as well, Will. So it can drive up productivity, but quality then starts to drop.
Yes.
So looking at the correlation between the two.
Yeah. So our next step, our next step on the machine learning is actually to understand sort of rework. And once we understand rework, we can start to look at quality. Although quality is very, very difficult. Say, for example, I mean, welding, for example, there's if you when you're taught to weld, you're taught to listen to the sound of the crackling, and if you're sizzling bacon, then it's good. Sort of a different sound of that we can imply sort of like a too much gas or not enough gas and what have you. So we can record that sound, and we can actually start to flag that. It's like, well, there's potential of quality here, but that's a sort of a unique circumstance there. When we're putting up boards and they're 2 millimeters out, we're not going to get to that level of sort of determination. But then we've always got quality managers and supervisors there to fill that gap. As I said, it's not a silver bullet, but there's some areas where we can start to touch on that.
Presumably, so picking up on some of the things you said earlier about activities and things like counting the number of screws that have gone into a board, you'd be able to say, well, hang on a minute, the average is 20 screws a board. This room, there's a much lower than average sort of screw count. Therefore, we might want to send somebody round to have a look at that.
Yeah, exactly. And this guy's taken out 50% of the screws he's put in.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So yes, it's a sort of raising a flag. There's something a bit different here. Go and have a look.
Yeah.
Rather than this is poor quality.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So is this something then you could link with other tools? And in fact, so Barry, yours, so a question partly about the quality and productivity, but also partly about links to other tools that collect data, so laser scanning and photogrammetry, that kind of thing.
Is that build dots and your Contilios and those sort of people, you talking to those?
There's ideas.
Can this be used in seismic exploration? Can this be used in seismic exploration? Can this be used in?
We're not exploring that at the moment. We're just sort of we're looking at the human behavior side of things. I'm not so familiar with the seismic side of seismic exploration, but potentially IoT solutions in a different way, potentially, yes. Sorry, Gareth, integrations with other tools.
Yeah, so things like laser scanning tech and the build dots, Contilio, disperse, various other tools like that collect data about the site?
Yeah, so the photogrammetry side of things, they're a great collaboration for us because they record what has been they record sort of progress, but they don't understand how that progress was achieved. So yes, we started off seeing them as competitors, but actually no, they're probably more collaborators. And there's a way we think that actually using both of these tools together. This is what's been put up, and this was the man hours and the resources required to do that. So yeah, we push our data into our own platforms and BI tools, but we can serve it to anybody and mash it with any data. And I think that's the real value of feeding it into that one platform where you can have a single source of truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a big question from Jamie Stewart, but I think that's probably one to catch up later. It sounds like you probably worked together in the past.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi,
So,
Jamie.
so let's go into.
Sorry, I was going to say, so there's a general question in. So yeah, I think definitely worth following up with Jamie offline, Will. But there's a general question about spotting gaps in competence and using that using the technology to be able to find gaps in competence and then work with the industry to solve those or close those gaps.
So training is another fascinating area. We're working with Erigal Contracts at the moment, and they have a dry lining company in Ireland, and they have a training academy for young apprentices coming into the dry lining industry. So this is a great opportunity for us. Like, okay, so they have hats and they record the data, and we can actually start to see the increase in performance of the individuals once they've received X pounds worth of training. So it's your ROI on training, which again, everybody knows, yes, training is good. I've got to spend my training budget, but I don't know how long it takes to return that value. And I can't justify to my boss upping that budget. But yes, having some hard data on that, saying this over 50,000 man hours, this is the increase in performance that training gives, is really tangible evidence.
So you start to look at some of the productivity incentives, what that does for human behaviours. Have you done much research on that? And back to Colin's point here about the productivity benefit and the incentivization between these high cost countries like UK and Norway versus some of the lower cost countries.
Yeah.
Have you looked at the research into that and the psychology behind it?
The first bit, like paying people, basically, it's like sort of like a digital piece rate, paying people exactly for their performance. We start to edge towards the financial sector, where bonuses, where pay is tied directly to their performance, which is very numbers orientated. And of course, you get the problems in the financial sector of burnout and stress and what have you. So yes, there's all these artifacts that are potentially on the horizon and coming up. So that's something we want to have that on our roadmap and be able to sort of tackle that. But exactly how we manage that and minimize those impacts, it's sort of to be determined at this point. On the subject of sort of the higher skilled the higher pay industries in Norway and Scandinavia and what have you, I think there's different levers we can pull depending on the difference in capability in the workforce and also the difference in pay scales. The chronic illnesses, the health and safety, just the general visibility. How does your day fit into the overall project? And if you don't turn up today, what impact does that have on the project? Having that visibility through the data is really valuable for individuals, and to actually see how you fit into all of that gives you your position and sort of validates your effort that you're putting in aside from the paycheck that you're receiving.
Cool. So, have you got a view as well, Will? So you can do this with sort of manual work, but you can also do it with office work. in terms of measuring people's outputs and stuff like that. So if we start to link this, the correlation between, you know, the our planners' performance, people being in the right time at the right place, so you can join it all up as an ecosystem.
There's a few companies that I forget the name of the company that have a tag and they measure who's talking to who. It's a little bit controversial. I think the closest we get to is looking at management on the site, and actually how often does management come down onto the site and understand how often do they walk the floor, how often do they spend talking to supervisors. So what we can do is we can range between hats and say, right, this supervisor, he's spoken to all of his guys, he spent at least 5 minutes with all of his guys today. This guy hasn't covered his group so much, and you've got more low performers in there, or you've got more downtime. I think that's the angle for the management side. Measuring productivity in an office, it's very subjective, I think, or much more subjective. And to be honest, we go where the big problems are, where the lowest hanging fruit. And what we found with that distribution, that sevenfold difference, is it's in the workforce. It's upskilling those people and motivating these guys. All the sort of the other features or the other technological developments, yes, they're absolutely fundamental and they knit everything together. But we're stepping into the human behavior side, which is an area which is very difficult to manage because the technology up until sort of now hasn't been there.
Okay, cool. So
I think
Stephen's put his hand up.
Yeah.
So basically, if people want to come off mute now and to have a conversation with Will, then please feel free to do so. So Stephen, if you want to come off mute. Stephen, are you there?
Hi, Stephen.
Hi there, Will. Thank you for the presentation. I can't get my camera on, so I don't think you can see me.
We can hear you fine though, Steve.
I can hear you, no problem.
Fine, that's great, thank you. I've taken a few notes down, so I'm not sure which questions to ask, but I just wanted to double check. I work at Sir Robert McAlpine. We're a tier 1 contractor. How do you envisage the device working when we give out packages? So also, you mentioned the device goes in a hard hat. Within construction, there's kits such as MyZone, which is a work alert system. So that too goes in a hard hat or on the armband. And if someone's working close to a plant or machine, it buzzes to warn them not to go within that zone. Have you looked to team up with such company? Because that way, yeah, a company such as Sir Robert McAlpine can collect both data. And I've just looking at my notes. The last thing is, being in construction, as we know, we've got a shortage of workers with various skills. Do you think that if you start with certain companies, that if them workers don't want to be monitored, they'll just move to someone else who don't have that type of device? And that's everything from me. Thanks, Will.
Yeah, great. I'm just sort of writing these. Don't want to be monitored. Okay. So to begin, right, tier one contractors. You generally, I mean, I'm going to sort of generalize here, so forgive me for a second, but you generally issue lump sum contracts. So the subcontractors will turn up, and the CPI measurement, that productivity, you're interested in it because it reduces your preliminaries. But on a sort of a day-to-day management, the subcontractor has got that CPI measurement, and they want to drive productivity. What's really important for you guys is the logistics side of things. So how do you set up your site to help your subcontractors make the most out of that day, and so you can reduce your schedule and reduce your preliminaries. So looking at your vertical transport, looking at where does a hoist stop, looking at your material movement, as well as the health and safety side of things. So the way it would work with a tier 1 is that we would have a sort of cost sharing approach with the subcontractors and the tier 1, and even potentially the client as well, up the scale. So the guys where it's the device, a portion of the data is delivered to the subcontractor. Another portion is delivered to the main contractor. Of course, that's not all the secrets. We would limit that to say just location data and hold productivity back for the subcontractor. And again, up to the client, if that's going that way, then we would limit it again. So there's a sort of a funnel of data going up. And this would all be sort of from a single source, and the cost of that would be obviously shared. Teaming up with MyZone, I think we sit as there's companies where we can collaborate with, where we can share data of platforms like Fieldwire and Procore and this kind of stuff. The wearable devices, we've packed our device with so much technology in there. It's just a question of time before we can do all of those sort of zoning stuff. I don't expect people to be wearing multiple wearable devices on a single hard hat, because that's multiple charging options and various things. So I see them as a sort of a direct competitor to that. But I don't see that's a problem, because at the moment they probably solve a slightly different problem to what we're addressing. But I do see sort of it needs to be a one-stop shop. So that product needs to deliver all of those elements, whether it's checking qualifications to operate vehicles, or restricted areas, or permit to works, that kind of thing. So I think the pressure is on us to actually sort of deliver those extra bits that customers want.
As well, Will, in terms of where you're going to be as a main contractor in the future, if you're looking at all these constraints, so you've got constraints about where to place welfare and all these other things, things like use of the cranes, use of the pit lanes. As a main contractor, if you Uber optimize all of that, that's where you're going to make your margin. So is this going to be a race? Are you going to facilitate a race inside of the main contractors? Is that they need this brand new cadre of people, and it's not just bringing in data scientists to do this stuff, because you need domain knowledge so you can integrate it all together. Do you see that the role of the main contractor is going to change as a consequence of this?
I see the makeup of the main contractor and the subcontractor, the skills in those organizations, to change drastically. Yeah. And once there'll be a tipping point that, yeah, we need data analysts. We need data analysts with domain knowledge, with site experience, with dirty boots, because, yeah, Mafic as a company, we've got construction people, we've got firmware people, we've got machine learning, and we need that whole sort of range of skills. And that's the same in the construction side. We will try and make this, or we make this as simple as possible. And you use our product and you pull these simple levers and you'll get 20%. But if you want that next 20%, well, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to get your hands dirty and do that yourself. So
yeah, absolutely, couldn't agree more. And it changes the makeup of and it is the playing field that everybody, not just main contractors, that are dealing with. And so as well as the sort of logistical examples, the other sort of big opportunity from a main contractor point of view is that if you've got all of your subcontractors and you've got a limited amount of performance data that's been shared with the main contractor, you're then able to understand, okay, well, which are the subcontracts that are causing blockers, which are the areas that actually we're seeing chronic underperformance across a whole series and a whole portfolio of different projects. There's huge ramifications for everybody.
Yeah, and likewise this this lowballing. So yeah, you lowball a contract just to get it, and then it's change order. So actually, in the pre-construction, in the bid stage, you can validate all of this and actually say, well, it's not physically possible. I know. We say that at the moment, we get a bid and there's like, oh, we don't think it's possible, but we can't demonstrate it. We can't prove that it's not possible. And
especially when you've got someone else that's saying, no, absolutely, it's possible, we can do this. And
and we're the cheapest, or they're the cheapest.
Yeah,
So yes, it comes back to this sort of evidence side of things. Sorry, Steve, on the last bit on Steve's question, the shortage of workers and workers going elsewhere. If that happens, we're doing something fundamentally wrong, because our vision is to benefit not only the shareholders but the operatives. And I could foresee that happening if you take the attitude right. You wear this, we're going to track you. If you don't work hard enough, you're off. That kind of approach, it will break people down, and of course it's no way to sort of build this technology up. Making sure that there's value, tangible value for everybody who is putting time and effort into this system is key and fundamental. And as I said, the budget for that is huge because of that 7-fold difference.
Cool.
Thank you, Will.
Right.
One last thing, Mafic is a form of rock. Any particular reason that you picked that name for the business?
So the business the product used to be called Glass, and I did an a trademark infringement on it, and came up short with Google. So Mafic stuck and Glass went.
Fair enough.
Sorry, Mafic is an igneous rock from which you can make glass.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So chaps, we're out of time. So a massive thanks, Will. That was brilliant tonight. Loads and loads of insights from that. I would say to all of you out there, don't just look at the tech, right? Don't just look in terms of what Will's presented you today. Think about, what's the transformational potential of this sort of thinking, right? It's going to change your jobs. I think he's indicated that. It's going to change the skills you need. It's going to change the way you work, right? And I think Will's just scratching the surface. It can take this so much further. And once you start to join it with some of this other tech, your build.c type solutions, etc., there's a massive integration job to be done as well. So there's jobs for people to start to integrate this stuff together and get the insights on the optimization, right? It's a brand new set of career paths out there. So please get involved in it. Reach out to Will as well. So if you're interested in following up with Will, then please do so.
Yeah. So we're talking with Martin and his team for Project Hack, and so putting our data. One element to this is there's so much value in this data that we want other people to start ringing it. We're not big enough. We'll never be big enough to get all the value out of this. So we're building a platform that other people can tap into and extract this value.
Absolutely superb. So get involved in Project Hack as well if you want to sort of dig deeper into some of this data. Will you be there as well? Will you, Will?
I will be. Yes.
So there's a great opportunity to come along, meet Will, and ask him a load of questions as well. So so please get involved. So it's a community for your benefit, and that's why we run these events, is try and inspire you and try and move the dial. So if you want to come off mute, a big round of applause to Will. Thank you so much. And a big thanks to Gareth as well. So thank you, Gareth, for joining in the conversation tonight. So if you've got any questions, please send them through to Will, and he'll follow up. But big thanks from me as well, Will. That was great tonight. Really enjoyed that. Excellent.
Great. Good. Yeah,
the video should be live.
My door's always open on LinkedIn, so send me stuff on that. No problem.
So the video should be live in the next 48 hours or so. So if you do want to share this with some of your colleagues and start to inspire them, please do so. And if you see stuff on LinkedIn, then please like it and share it, because it means we can get the word out there. The way the LinkedIn algorithms work, you just keep liking stuff and sharing it and commenting on it. It just means we get the community going and we start to move quicker together. So thanks a lot, everybody. Enjoy your evening. Thanks.